From WBGO, this is Newark Today, your monthly look at what's happening in and around New Jersey's largest city. And now, here's your host, Michael Hill.
Welcome to the May 18th, 2023 edition of Newark Today on WBGO 88.3 FM and on WBGO.org. I'm your host, Michael Hill. The Honorable Mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, is with us once again this evening. We have a lot of territory to cover this evening. We'll be talking about My Brother's Keeper, Newark, and what former President Obama has done for this organization in Newark. We'll be talking about contractors, the call for contractors and developers to come and develop properties that are already existing in the city of Newark. We'll be talking about gun violence and other violence and how to prevent that in the city of Newark and perhaps in other places as well. The number to call here if you want to participate in this conversation, we certainly hope that you do, is 973-297-0941. That's 973-297-0941. Surely you have a question, a comment, or a concern you'd like to share with the mayor. He's here tonight. You can certainly call in and certainly ask what your question is for the mayor this evening. Mr. Mayor, thank you once again for joining us.
Always. Thank you.
How are you, sir?
I'm good.
You're good. How's the family?
Everybody's good. Thank God.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Let's start off, Mr. Mayor, with this, the call for contractors and developers, those for-profit and even nonprofit in the city of Newark. What's the goal here?
Well, we're doing this community redevelopment kind of project in the citywide. We've been having meetings. We're about to target neighborhoods that have been disinvested in for a very, very long time, and we're just pulling people together that are able to help us revitalize those communities before the market changes it.
I noticed in the release I saw for this, you're looking for experienced developers and contractors. You want people who have experience in this and know what they're doing.
Right, because this is serious work. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're going to partner with them. Obviously, the city is filling a lot of the gaps, give them opportunities that other developers don't have, even downtown, to do the kind of development that we need them to do. And we're not talking about one-off lots. We're talking about contiguous lots that we put together, both public and private, and both residential and commercial.
And is this, to a certain extent, you mentioned lots, but what about some of the properties that are still standing in Newark that may have been abandoned? You want them to develop and work on those as well?
Yeah, when I mean lot, I mean a block and lot number.
Yes.
It could be an abandoned property there, or it can be empty, right? So all of the parcels that are there, we want to bring them all together so we can have a bigger development and not just this one box, kind of Bayonne box developments that used to happen in the city.
As you're driving around the city of Newark, though, there are a lot of properties like that in all over the city. So there's plenty of opportunities.
Plenty of opportunities. That's why we have the land bank. That's why we're the only city with a land bank, because we have so many properties that need to be taken off the city and put back on its rolls, its tax rolls. And we have to do that expeditiously. I mean, without a land bank, you'd have to do every property one at a time through the municipal council that way, which would be incredibly long. And land bank has more flexibility in how they dispose of these properties.
So the plan is you vet these contractors and developers, nonprofit and for-profit, and then you assign them properties, or they bid on these properties to develop them?
Well, first they have to, if it's city property, they're not going to have to bid. We want them to form kind of groups together. So we want them to work with each other, preferably a nonprofit with a profit developer, with other kind of folks come together, financing and pull us together, and we fill in the gap. So we want all of that to work together. I mean, so it's not, you just have a nonprofit over here and a profit over here. We're trying to bring them together in a group to do larger, volume in this.
And have them work together.
Yeah.
Right, so there's better coordination.
Yeah, and we also don't want to give multiple properties to one individual. So like what was the past practice, we want to be able to ensure that, the city's well-being is taken care of, because there's a group effort in it and not just an individual enriching themselves off a city property.
So once you get the groups together and they're vetted and so forth, they work on these properties, they rebuild them or they build them, and then they're for sale on the open market for people who live in Newark?
Yeah, they become we want to do a lot of affordability, so yeah, they'll become on sale for the folks in the city of Newark. There's also commercial space that have been abandoned for a very long time. We want to be able to encourage development in those areas as well. So cor- corridors and properties that have been left, vacant for long periods of time, we want to invest in that, and we think that helps. That's going to help change the character of the neighborhood, and eventually the content of the things that are taking place in that neighborhood.
Have the developers you're looking for, have they been knocking on City Hall's door, anxious to get this kind of work done, looking at the city and looking at the opportunity?
Well, individually, you have developers who are doing that, mid-sized to small developers, mostly minority women developers who are doing a lot of work in the city, by the way, but it's a tedious process and they do one project at a time,
Right. I've seen some of them over there on the streets like South 16th and
That's right.
15th, and it seems like it's a miracle what they've done in some of these
Oh
properties.
yeah, and they do one property here, one property here,
Right.
and it's great. But if we continue in that way, we'll be doing this for the next 25 years. So we want to be able to do more volume in a shorter period of time by putting people together.
Will they run into issues still, you think, with supplies, getting supplies to build and rebuild at this point?
I mean, probably. I mean, as long as the supply chain stuff is an issue, but I think that it has not been a big issue as it was prior to what's happening now. A lot of development happening, and I think a lot of that stuff is clearing up.
I want to switch topics here and talk about the $1 property sale. Does that
Yeah.
figure in any of this as well?
Not specifically, but
Right.
because it's in those neighborhoods, it also adds to what we're trying to do for the most part. These are individuals who are looking for homes in the city of Newark, homes in some of the property that you've been talking about, building property that's up, that's dilapidated, that need some tender care, some attention, invest in those properties. So we're trying to get people to invest in Newark and people to invest in Newark who might not necessarily have all of the resources that other people have.
When do you envision the $1 property sale actually starting in Newark? Is it
Yeah, the council already voted, gave us permission to do that. The first 40 properties are going through the foreclosure process, and once that happens, preferably we'll have them available. In about a month, people will be out there. You got people already going through the process to
Right.
kind of prepare themselves for that, and then we're going to rethink how we get those properties available. We might not go through the foreclosure process, but just directly through the land bank, so we can get more properties available at one time.
Are you still having an issue with LLCs
Oh yeah,
looking at Newark and saying, okay, it's a golden opportunity to come in here and buy these properties and jack
sure.
up rents?
Yeah, even with all the lights shining on them, they don't care about that. I mean, so it's about because what they're doing is not illegal. So as long as they have the money and people going to sell them the property, they're going to keep doing it, right? That's why we are racing against time when we do this. The things that we're doing, we're fighting against a tide that's going in the opposite direction.
Are you hearing from other mayors about what you're trying to do with housing in Newark and the call for developers, the $1 property sale? Are you hearing from other mayors in New Jersey or across America?
Yeah, I think for the most part, most mayors are because housing is a problem in the United States now. Just the amount of housing that's available and the affordability of it. So people are trying to be as creative, and we exchange ideas from tiny homes to everything else. So people are exchanging ideas. I just sent my economic development director something that I got from Detroit, a tiny home village where people are renting. I mean, their rent is like $250 to $300 in these
Wow.
tiny homes. So, I mean, just trying to be as creative as possible. And I think people are going to take what we've done, and we're going to take what other people have done.
What do you envision as you embark on these initiatives? What do you envision for Newark, say in 5 years, in 10 years, as you embark on something like this and you compare now to then, 5, 10 years
Yeah,
from now?
just more housing available, more options, more variety of options available in the market, and through the zoning ordinance, more opportunity for people to use their property that they have to allow other people to stay there, to move in. So create many more housing options to decrease the kind of transitional homelessness that exists in the city. Some of the chronic homelessness that exists in the city, kind of reduce all of that at the same time, and at the same time, really give a shot in the arm to the kind of corridors in the community that have been disinvested in, kind of transform those neighborhoods through the kind of investment that'll take place.
Are you getting help from the state with any of this in terms of the legislature, the governor, the executive branch?
Well, a lot of talk, but we hopefully we get some money. I mean, that's what we need, and so everybody is approved. We just need them to put their money where their mouth is. We're waiting for some money around homelessness that's coming from the United States Treasury. Hopefully that comes through soon. We asked the state for money for this community development opportunity, and hopefully that's going to come through through the transformational kind of projects. And I think what we're doing is transformational projects. So hopefully those things will happen.
The state is listening.
Yeah, absolutely. But we need them to do more than listen. You know what I mean? Go in their pocket.
And are you getting the kind of help you need in terms of other legislative issues, other things out of Trenton to run the city of Newark, improve the city of Newark?
Yeah, I mean, right now we are, working on a variety of different things. One is the liquor license piece, which is important to us, especially in the arts and education district. Down here, we have a lot of vacants, and part of it is because of the build out. These developers want restaurants and other places to build out first. So we're trying to create a fund so we can build out things for folks and get them in there. And the liquor license is important. So to build out, the state is going to help with that. And, we're going to help match the money that we put in it through UEZ. And, hopefully this liquor license thing pans out, which allows us to give people who can't afford to get a license on an open market at $200,000 to $350,000 an opportunity to open up a business downtown and have a liquor license. Especially Black and brown businesses that could do a lot better than what they're doing if they had an opportunity to have a liquor license as well. So
I'm going to talk, Mr. Mayor, too, about closing. You appeared with Senator Menendez earlier this month in closing the gun background check loophole.
Yeah.
Money coming from legislation that was passed, now law, in 2022, I believe it was, last June. And what would that do for the city of Newark?
Well, I think, first, New Jersey has some of the most strict gun laws in the nation. What happens is all of these guns show up here, right? And we have to do what we can here to close all of the little things that make it possible for people to get their hands on guns, but also help pass federal legislation, through our United States senators, support them in what they're doing to make access to guns that much more difficult here in the state of New Jersey. So whether it's assault ban, rifle bans, or assault gun bans, or loopholes or identification, all of that stuff we supports and helps us here in the city of Newark.
How do you explain? How do you explain Allen, Texas, Uvalde, Texas,
right?
Virginia, a school shooting there, a kid with a gun in school. How do you explain all that?
Well, I mean, I think the gun culture in America is pervasive. It is buttressed by the power of the NRA and their lobbying efforts on Congress that kind of stalls any real progress around gun control. It just doesn't make sense that it's more difficult for you to get a driver's license than it is for you to get a gun in most states in America, and many states in America. It's a problem, and and people can sell you guns without any background checks in some places, without any license or anything. It's a problem. Or you can carry a gun at a beach, in a movie, at a bar. I mean, these things are very dangerous, and I think this gun culture in America is created this problem. And what's interesting, all of these states all these Republican or red states that have all these laws have higher rates of these incidents, right? And that's something that needs to be discussed. They always put focus on what's going on in these cities because of violence that takes place in cities from guns that they get from those communities, by the way, violence that takes place in these cities, and not, the kind of gun culture that's going on in these red states around the country.
What's going to happen in America for things to change?
Well, I think ultimately there has to be a real serious level of organization. Like, people have to be really not just mobilized around every event. It has to be consistent national organization to push things in the right direction. And the Democrats, who are, ahead of this issue are divided in many fronts. And I think ultimately folks are going to have to come together and put this as a top issue and really push to make this happen. And I think the president is going to have to take some bold steps, and people are going to have to do these things at the risk of losing elections. These things, that's the only way that this stuff is going to happen. I mean, the NRA, the lobby is just too strong.
It is strong, and it has quite a grip on Congress. I mean, when these incidents take place, people offer prayers and condolences and so forth, and we hear it time and time again, but nothing changes.
Yeah, but we giving speeches too, so we have to also get on the ground and organize around this thing, and unite folks in these cities with folks in rural America and folks in suburban America who are being victimized by gun violence around the country, and make those issues one and the same, and put people together, a broad-based kind of coalition around this, and make it a national issue. Right now, it's not as broad-based as it should be. It's very isolated and disparate.
It is, and is there something to be done in terms of state to state rather than just looking at Congress?
Well, each state has a right to pass the legislation,
right?
That they pass based on what the Constitution allows them to do, which is what we see happening in America now, which is why it's going to take federal kind of effort, either the Supreme Court or really the Congress, to pass laws that enable states or mandate states do specific things. That has to happen. As long as the federal courts and the Supreme Court can interpret the Constitution that allows you to do these kinds of things with these guns, then there's nothing that can happen unless the federal legislature make laws that we have to abide by.
Does that then throw a monkey wrench into your plans with the violence prevention strategic plan?
It just makes it difficult. It just makes it more difficult. I mean, obviously, the more access people have to guns, especially when you're dealing with mental health issues, when you're dealing with access to drugs, when you're dealing with depression, when you're dealing with all these kinds of things, having a gun present exacerbates the situation.
It does. What is the violence prevention strategic plan? What is it?
Well, there's a few prongs that are on there that talk about making sure that we give resources to the organizations in the community, right, that are doing this work, the CVI organizations, so they can continue to do the work that they're doing it, that we use data and we take the data that we have and kind of use that data to figure out where we're going to be in the community and who we're going to be addressing specifically. I mean, those are things that appear in the report. So this is very well thought out. It's not just a bunch of things thrown together. This is a well thought out plan.
And it has a large buy-in?
Yeah, I think the buy-in from at least the leadership around the city is clear in all sectors. And, community folks, I think they buy in as well because they're beginning to see these people out in their communities, giving them the assistance that they need, whether it's, mental health treatment or opportunities for jobs or showing up when they need them the most at the hospital and all these other kinds of things, and preventing retaliation. I think folks begin to see even the police department begin to see the necessity of this.
So if you had that kind of organization on crime, if you had that kind of organization on guns, you could make.
Sure, absolutely. And, ultimately anything that is successful in this country, look, if we got a black president 2 times in a row because of that broad-based coalition that I just talked about, then that coalition could probably put together anything they wanted to put together. When you take black and brown folks and labor and progressives and put everybody together and say, look, this is what we're going to do, then that's what's going to happen. So if people say, look, we're going to do something with guns and not make it an urban issue and then a suburban issue and then a rural issue, and talk about overall access to guns and why we have access to guns and begin to deal with it wholly, then I think we could get some movement on it, besides everybody arguing and talking about it in the press.
Part of that organization you're talking about involves My Brother's Keeper, Newark, and Mark, I'm going to make sure I get your name right here. Mark Comasanias?
Yes.
I got it right.
Yes, absolutely.
Mark Comasanias, thank you very much for joining us, is the executive director of My Brother's Keeper, and I'm glad that you're here because just this month, former President Obama recognized My Brother's Keeper, Newark, and tell us more about that. What happened?
Sure, absolutely. So thank you for having me
You're welcome.
to be able to talk about this celebration, quite frankly, for the entire city. It's not just about My Brother's Keeper Newark, but the executive director of the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, Dr. Adrian Wilson, began to vet communities across the country. There are over 200 MBK communities in the country that have made a commitment to think strategically about how they are serving boys and young men of color. And the charge for Dr. Wilson at that time was to identify model communities across 6 MBK life milestones in the lives of boys and young men of color. Those milestones are: number one, that they are entering school ready to learn; number two, that our particularly boys of color are reading at a third grade level by third grade; milestone three is that they are graduating from high school; four is that they are enrolling in something after high school, college, technical school, something
Mhm.
of that nature. Milestone five is that they are successfully and gainfully employed. And then milestone six is the milestone for which the city of Newark was recognized, which is keeping boys and young men of color safe from violent crime. We've seen historic lows in the city with regards to crime and homicides, particularly. We've seen a 55% reduction in the last decade. And so those numbers caught the attention, quite frankly, of the country. But in this case, former President Obama, who's seeing the work that's happening in the city as a model for other communities to be able to glean and learn from.
Mr. Mayor, there's a lot to learn then from Newark in terms of violence reduction.
Yeah, I mean, by God's grace, the work that we've been doing, we put our head down and keep moving. I don't think that we did this in order to get the accolade, but I think that, because of the work that we've been doing, we've been getting results, and we want to continue to do that and expand it.
Good. We have a caller here. Cass is on the line. Cass, you have a question, a comment, or a concern for Mark or the mayor? Yes, go ahead, please.
How are you? Well, I have to say that's not true. First of all, there is already the requirement. The requirement is just too low. It's 1 year. We've been getting the state to make them do it for 5 years. If you come to some of the police community roundtables or some of the, I just saw a bunch of police officers at St. John's Baptist Church on Bergen Street introducing themselves to the community. And out of the 12 cops that were introduced there, at least 10 of them were directly from Newark. They identified the schools they went to. They played football in the city of Newark. In fact, two of them said that Pat Council, the councilman, was their coach. So that dynamic is changing and has changed for some time now. So 10 years ago, if you said that, I would have agreed when the department was predominantly white. The department now is actually the most people in the department are Latino, and then African American, and then Caucasian. So that dynamic is completely different.
Good. Mark, how important is it to have police officers who are from Newark, living in Newark while they're on the force?
I think this is extremely important. I kind of come to this work as an educator. I've been a teacher and a principal in this city. And so there are many former students of mine and there are friends of mine as I grew up as a son of this city who are in the police force at different levels. They understand the community, the residents. They understand kind of the genesis, if you will, of many of the reasons or root causes, if you will, of the violence in the community. And I think, there's an understanding amongst the residents of this city that the people are not the problem, that there are historical reasons why we see some of the violence we've seen in the city. But they also can remember what this city was like I do growing up.
Mhm.
And although the city, I've said this often, is not necessarily where we want it to be, 50 homicides is still 50 too many. they also can testify to the progress that's been made over the last decade with regards to violence, homicide, shootings, and things of that nature. And so that's because they've been here, right? They grew up in these neighborhoods, they went to these schools, they played in the basketball leagues, Pop Warner leagues. And so they remember what the city was, they know what the city is. And I believe that there is, a desire to make sure the city continues to improve.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that you're trying to get help from the legislature in terms of the requirement for officers to live in the city. What is it again now? It's 1 year right now?
Yeah, right now, police and fire is 1 year. We actually trying to pass local legislation to make it 2 because Jersey City has 2. So right now, you have to live in Newark. By the time you enter the academy, you have to have a Newark resident. And you for a year, then after a year you can move. And some people do take advantage of that. They come here for that year. They're not from Newark. They've done that for years. We get on the force and then they go back to Brick Township, wherever they're from. But at the end of the day, what we've been doing, like even now, we have our own process of recruitment. We don't have to have civil service. So now we can directly go to Newark residents and allow them to go through the process without even taking a civil service exam. And we pay for them to get the tools and equipment that they need. So the cost of doing that is not prohibitive for them. So we've been doing that, and it's been helpful for our residents. Right.
Mr. Mayor, I want to talk about you met with the former president on My Brother's Keeper. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
What's going to come from that? And Mark, I'm going to ask you the same question. What's going to come from that recognition from the president?
First, there's a monetary grant that folks are going to use.
800,000.
To do the work that at least seed some of the work that needs to happen. But I think it's really a call to action for us. Like, I think on the flip of recognizing one area, it makes you really focused on the other areas. It says, wow, we did well in this, but we have to really do well in these other areas. And the same effort that we put in one, we have to do in the other 5. And I think it helps us galvanize around those issues and bring folks that really are interested in this, together. And there are a lot of people in the city that want to build. They just don't live on social media. There are people who are in the city of Newark who actually want to make these things happen. I think this gives us an opportunity to galvanize them.
Mark, I'm going to have you stick around. Mr. Mayor has to leave. Mr. Mayor, you have to leave at 8:30, right?
Yes, sir.
Quick question for you, though. Where do you stand right now in your consideration in running for governor? Where does it all stand?
Every time, man. Same place, but I you know what? I think we're getting closer, man. We're getting closer.
Closer to make a decision.
Yeah, closer to making a decision about it, man. And after I tell my folks, my personal people around me, if I'm gonna do that, the next stop is WBGO with Michael Hill, and I'm gonna make sure that we bring it out right here on Jazz 88 and let you guys know what we're gonna do. That's a promise.
I appreciate that. Yes. I appreciate that. Good. Are you? Give us a hint here. How you're leaning? Where are you in this process?
Well, we're still doing the statewide listening to. I was just at Asbury Park Saturday. It was a great turnout. A lot of people there. Talking about issues that affect them. Same issues that we have, they have there. Issues around housing, around homelessness, around gun violence, around not being able to afford some of the things that they want to be able to afford, and living in the beach community and the segregation that exists. So the same kind of themes that we talk about is what people are talking about around the state, which gives me, encouragement. I mean, pause, one, that these things are that pervasive, but 2, it gives you encouragement that, your language and message that you're talking about will resonate with a lot of folks around the state because they all want the same things.
Right. How often are you holding these listening sessions?
We, as often as we can. I would say we at least do two a month. I tell you this, by the end of the summer, we'd have seen every county in New Jersey.
Wow. Even Cape May, Cumberland,
everywhere. Yeah. So we working. When we not on WBGO, we out there.
Do you? Let me ask you this: do you want to run for governor?
I mean, I tell you this: like when I was the councilman, I didn't necessarily say I want to be the mayor, right? I think circumstance and opportunity and necessity presented itself, and I said, "Look, this is something that I'm going to do." I jumped out the window and took a risk, to do that, and I did it. Probably with less information that I'm working on trying to get now. Right, I just jumped out the window because I thought that it was time to do that. Right now, and I think that the opportunity presents itself, and if the data looks like it, we are going to jump out there and do it.
Mr. Mayor, I always appreciate your time,
Yep.
sir.
You
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And when we come back, we'll have other guests here. Mark is going to stick around. You sticking around, Mark?
Absolutely.
We appreciate that. We're also going to have Lakeisha Ure from the Newark Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery Office here talking to us, and along with Miss Sonia Rogers, who lost 3 sons to gun violence in the city of Newark. We'll be right back on WBGO Newark Today.
On the next episode of Milestones, we continue our conversation with drummer-composer T.S. Monk, who joins us to mark the anniversary of his father's 1963 recording, Monk's Dream. We'll delve into the unique interplay within his band during this period and Thelonious Monk's relationship to his wide-ranging influences and affinities from the blues to Bing Crosby, as well as his mentors.
We went to see Duke Ellington. We got there maybe 10 minutes late for the show. And when they opened the doors and we stepped in, I'll never forget it. Duke Ellington stopped the band. He stopped the band. And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you have to excuse me for stopping the band, but the baddest left hand just walked in the door, Thelonious Monk."
Milestones with Angelica Wiener, a podcast from WBGO Studios. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or go to wbgo.org/studios.
We are back live on WBGO Newark Today here in the studio in downtown Newark. We have a full studio. Mark is sticking around for a second half hour. We also have Miss Sonia Rogers here. We also have Lakeisha Ure, who is with the Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery Office. She directs that office and is quite active. She crisscrosses the country, and she's quite involved in not just in Newark, but in other communities as well. Thank you all very much for coming in this evening. We really appreciate it. Lakeisha, I want to start off with you. There's this violence prevention strategic plan. What is it?
So the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery launched a strategic plan, but we've been working on this plan since we launched the office. So the office launched in 2021. Ultimately, I started 2021, but the mayor signed the executive order in 2020 after the George Floyd protests and around defunding the police, ultimately. So we reallocated 5% of the police department's budget to be able to create the office. And so we needed to lay out a plan as to what the goals, the objectives are. And so the strategic plan, we just released it, and it's really built on our 4 pillars, our 4 areas that the mayor ultimately started to talk about. And the first one is about supporting communities to have an active role in creating public safety. And so we are ultimately doing violence as a public health issue, but it's community-based public safety that we're really doing so that the community has a role in it, they have a voice in it, and we ultimately know that law enforcement can't do the work alone. And community-based partners and the community is at the center of the work.
So you're not talking about this old school plan. Lakeisha, start over just a little bit if you would. We're not talking about this old school plan of this coming from the city, coming from the police department. We're going to tell you how this city needs to be policed and so forth. This is more community driven.
Absolutely community driven, because we know that we talk about public, right? And the public ultimately having to be in public safety. and that we can't have business as usual, the old school, right? That law enforcement has the voice, they authorize everything, and we can't police our way out of, and we can't arrest our way out of violence, right? Out of our social issues, out of our mental health issues, out of our educational issues. So really having a active role, having a better plan, and getting to the root causes of what's really happening.
Ms. Rogers, thank you very much for coming in this evening. I want to talk to you. You lost three sons to gun violence in Newark. What do you think of this approach of the community being really the community leading as much as this city is leading in talking about violence prevention and trying to prevent some of the things that have taken place in the city of Newark?
Well, me personally, I think it's a good idea because I think more community involvement, you know, I'm sorry. I
That's
think
okay.
more community involvement is better. You know, people don't react to police, but they act to community. They act to, not saying that the police are not humans, but they react to regular people, So when you go in these communities, these are people that's just like us. So, they relate better, and trust us more, just a little, not saying that they don't trust the police, but, they have a better chance with us.
Right. Mark, I'm going to bring you back to this conversation. Mark Comisanios, My Brother's Keeper, Newark Executive Director. Mark, are you part of this strategic plan, My Brother's Keeper, and this effort to prevent violence and help recover from trauma in Newark?
Yeah, absolutely. We are part of this community violence intervention ecosystem and the strategic plan. The strategic plan kind of gleans on kind of three ideas specifically that I've seen within the community violence intervention ecosystem, which is collaboration. It's bringing organizations, community-based organizations, NPD folks together who are all tunneling at how do we reduce violence in our community. There's a prong of the strategy, which is focusing on data. We heard the mayor talk about that earlier, being really specific on the data that we're focusing on. The Newark Public Safety Collaborative out of Rutgers University has been a tremendous partner in this ecosystem and talking about, where do we see high incidences of crime? What corridors, what areas, what environmental factors contribute to the data that we're seeing with regards to crime? And then, as Director Yori was just talking about, the mobilizing of community members, this kind of, shifting of mindsets and thinking about public safety as the responsibility of all Newark's residents, not just those in uniform, is a mindset shift. It's a mindset shift for us as people of color, us in this city, in this community. And so I think about those prongs. I think about the ecosystem that exists, and we are one of several organizations that are part of that ecosystem.
Lakeisha, let me ask you this. Are police adapting to this? Are they, based on your experience, are they understanding what's taking place? Are they embracing what's taking place in Newark? Because it's not just, and you always talk about this, and you mentioned it here too. When it comes to public safety, it's about the public being involved in this. Are police, from your perspective, are they embracing this?
Absolutely, they are embracing it. And it started when we had our public safety director when O'Hara was here, right? And as part of the consent decree, there were a lot of policies that had to change. And as part of that, there were a lot of community members, and we were getting input from the community in terms of what they wanted to see and how they wanted to see it. But law enforcement had to be at those tables as well. And they were there. And so when the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery was developed, it was in partnership alongside law enforcement. It was equity, right? It wasn't, just this office off to the side. It was us getting investment dollars. It was us getting some real estate, right? Because we are in one of the police precincts that they closed down and put law enforcement in another place and gave us a place to be able to do our work. Having meetings, giving me a liaison, right, with the police, having weekly meetings with them, right? And so the equity piece was really, really important, and them being able to see us as equal partners in this work, being able to do trainings together. We do trainings together. My social workers, do some of the 2C trainings in law at the academy with them.
At the academy?
At the academy. They graduate on the same stage together. So when they're graduating law enforcement, then I have outreach workers and social workers that get to be at the graduation too. And they get to come up and get their hands shook and sworn in or whatever it is too, but really building and showing that they're at the table together. And so that's shifting, like Mark said, right? The culture that we once saw where law enforcement is at the top and everyone else at the bottom. Right. And so it's not that top down approach and the bottom, like it is really a place of equity.
Side by side.
Side by side. And before you couldn't call the police director and they answer the phone. You couldn't get the police chief on the phone, but we get notifications from them. We get information, data from them. They share information in terms of what's happening. And so we get to strategize around that in terms of having an alternative strategy to what they're doing, but ultimately with the community at the center.
Yeah, if I could share a really powerful anecdote from about 2 months ago. So monthly we have Brick City Peace Collective meetings, right? This is, through the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, community-based organizations coming together, looking at violence and crime data across the city. And so you have, maybe 30 folks representing, many different organizations, including NPD. And there was a young man, a son of this city, young Black man, who said, I think crime is going down because their arrests are up. And the captain of the South Ward, a white man, says, respectfully, I have to disagree. He said, I've been in this community and in the police force for over 20 years. I've never seen a correlation between arrests and crime. He said the reason crime is going down in this city is because of the work of the community-based organizations sitting around this table. I almost thought I was in the Twilight Zone, right? Like that was very different to Director Yori's point than the conversations that we would typically have about crime in the community. To have a police captain saying to community violence intervention CBOs, crime is down because of the work you are doing, not necessarily because all of a sudden we've started to arrest more people, which I'm not even sure was true at the time. That speaks to the culture that is kind of, permeating through the not just the community, but the police department as well. And so I think it's a really powerful anecdote of the impact that this work is having.
It sounds like a public safety parting of the Red Sea.
Yes. And can I also say quickly that we shouldn't be tone deaf. I'm clear that we have seen an uptick in violence in the city recently.
Why do you think that is? Why?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know.
I don't mean to
Ms.
cut
Rogers,
you off.
go ahead. No,
One
Ms.
thing
Rogers,
that
go
I
ahead.
could say about my city is sometimes when the green light starts flashing, sometimes you get that dim. But believe it or not, the green light is going to flash again. And that's just what happened. We doing this, communities coming together, stuff like that. And then you just had these shootings. But, that doesn't justify what we're trying to do as a collective together, the work as, we call it. It just so happened this is what happened. Because there was a time when this work was trying to come together and one of my sons passed away. So, it wasn't the people that was trying to do the work, it was the hands of someone else. So, I just wanted to justify that part because I'm on the outside, because I'm a parent of 3 murdered Black young men. So, when you're being stigmatized, I'm supposed to be in the back of all of this, but I'm supporting it because at the end, we all needed this. This brings back to it takes a village to help raise a kid, and with no disrespect, the women from this city, they fight for their children. We love our children. Some of us can't help how our children grow up, and some of us can't help how other children grow up. So this is where a lot of things happen and, come and it corrupts our city,
So how are you supporting this, Ms. Rogers?
Well, I'm supporting just by being active. When Keisha call, if she asks, I'm coming because at the end of the day, she's not just the director. This is also my friend.
Right.
And not only that, I needed shoulders. When things were happening to me, these things weren't here. When my children were growing up, it's either you were a parent or you just gave up. you know, and you had certain people around, but outside wasn't there like that, you know. And like far as the police, I see police, you know, and believe it or not, I'm not angry at the police department, none of that, you know, things of that nature. I've seen police in their uniforms doing this type of work, coming, you know, trying to just speak to people and stuff like that. I think it's really going to be a good, I think it's going to be a good program.
Have you seen that before in Newark, Miss Rogers?
Yes. Not this, no.
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 But you've seen the officers.
I've seen officers come to the neighborhoods, but you got to know this was when this first started.
Right.
You know, I've seen officers also playing basketball with children.
Mhm.
You know, I really like it because some of these officers are from here. You know, they're from here. Just so happened they got a job and this was the job that they chose. You know, some of them not bad. You know, we're just from here.
Right. Keisha, I got a text message here from somebody saying, would you give us an example of the plan and details of what the plan would do?
So the plan has beyond the four, you know, portions of it, right, is shifting the culture to think about trust, healing, and resilience.
And is that evident right now or this early in the campaign, you think?
Absolutely. This work has been on the grounds for over 10, 15, 20 years. Like, this isn't new, right? It's just more organized. The office is just a clearinghouse, right, to be able to help us have more accountability, to have more structure, and for it to be more organized. You have several people in the community that's been doing this work, helping people, supporting families, trying to help have a better quality of life, responding to shootings, robberies, carjackings, all of those things, supporting people, helping them get mental health treatment, getting them resources, helping them get violent crime, victims of crime compensation.
Mhm.
People been doing it as individuals without any money. I was, right? Newark Anti-Violence Coalition.
That's right.
Our other individuals in the community that still do this without even being under any organizations. But now we understand that there's an investment, right, that's happening. There's a huge investment that's happening in this work. And so we need to be able to have an organized way of getting those dollars through to our city and then down to the ground, so it trickles down to the people who are truly doing the work. And so we're trying to build trust in the community again, because we know that trust was lost, right? There hasn't been a huge trust in law enforcement, city government, different entities, right? And so trying to organize, mobilize, rebuild the trust, think about resilience. We know there's been a ton of harm done in our community, a ton of trauma, and there's unresolved trauma. And that's some of the root causes of why you continue to see this stuff happening generationally, right? We have our music that's filled with violence. We have the culture that's filled with violence. We had a whole 2 years of our, you know, students or kids not in school, right? Educational violence, political violence, financial violence, homelessness, right, is a national crisis, right? And so as we talk about all of those things, right, this plan is people can come. If something happened to you, if you were a victim of violence and crime, there's an office that you can come to now, and you can speak to a social worker. You can speak to an outreach worker. You can speak to someone and say, I need help, right? I don't feel safe. I need to relocate. How can you help me? And we'll get you the resources that you need to be able to relocate. I just need to talk to someone.
Have you had people actually show up?
Yeah, people come into the office every day. We are hiring hundreds of young people and youth. We have programs happening, you know, throughout the city. And so people come to the office. We have an office in the West Ward as well on South Orange Avenue. And people come there to get resources, to get help for food, clothing, shelter, transportation.
What about like a psychologist, psychiatrist, all those types of services? Are they available too?
They are available. We have 4 licensed clinical social workers on staff. We have master level social workers, bachelor level, people who may not be social workers at all, but they have lived experience, right? And they know where you need to go to get the resources, or we have them right there. Sometimes people just need someone that's relatable, somebody that's been through it. We have people who are formerly incarcerated who work for us, people who we've given second and third chances to. And these are the people who are of our community. And we know that the people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solutions.
Ms. Rogers, do you ever counsel any of these people, talk to them at all?
Yes, I've talked to
What do you say to them?
Just my heart, because nothing in my life is scripted. So I just speak off the top of my head. You know, it's a lot of pain here, and I can only speak for my city. And you know, with no disrespect, because I'm the aspect of all around.
Mhm.
It's not only a pain here from burying children. You have pain here from people losing their sister, their mothers,
Right.
things of that nature. So I can relate to all of that because I've lost all of that.
Mm.
My mother, like everything except for my two daughters, you know, so I can relate. And for me to still be able to at least be able to sit here and talk to you with the same brain, you know, on top of everything I'm going through. So when Keisha speaks, I'm that person. Well, one of those people that, you know, these young people talk about because I'm not a social worker, but my trauma can definitely help heal someone. I've encountered people on a oh my goodness, so many people throughout the course of a day that just say to me, I just want a hug, or just thank you, or you just keeping doing what you're doing just motivates me. And they don't even understand how much that does for me.
Mm.
You know, so they say one hand washes the other one washes the face, or however it goes. That's my heart for this work because there's so many people out here that don't want to go to a regular doctor or something like that. They would rather come and talk to me. When in the beginning, I didn't want to go to a doctor. I wanted to talk to Keisha. I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to talk to Baraka. I wanted to talk, but it wasn't to a professional because I wanted to talk to somebody that related to me, you know? So that's how some people feel. And I think, I don't know why I was put here for this, but if this is a reason for that, I'm here for it.
Do you think your pain, do you think your trauma, do you think your experience and what you relate to and what you share with people, do you think that's prevented more harm, more trauma, more death, more crime in the city?
No, no, because I didn't do anything. I didn't pick up first off. You know, when I try to talk to people, I just try to talk from the heart. And
But don't you think that helps so that resonates with people, that it gets to people's hearts, and somebody might have second thoughts about doing harm and so forth?
well, I think so. I think it helps. I think it really helps people, honestly. You know how many people I call it talking off of a ledge? You know, I spoke to a young lady just the other day, just downtown the other day, and her son was only 16 years old. And she just thought my story was so bad. But in reverse, I let her know I think that's terrible. You would think that because I lost three children, that
Mhm.
it's just so bad. I think a parent losing her only child is the worst thing in the world. I think a woman that has to bury her daughter is the worst thing in the world. You know, so everybody thinks something is so much worse. This is why, not I'm here, but this is why I'm here to help, you know, because you're not as bad as me. I'm not as bad as you, you know. One, you know, it's just it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's a lot of hurt. And believe it or not, just a hug, one simple hug
Mhm.
can change somebody's day. You never know that. And you know, I appreciate them allowing me to come in because it helps me so much. It helps me so much through my depression, through my anxiety. Because before I would never even speak those words. I would never speak those words. But I'm a human being. And if I'm not broken or heartbroken or something, there's something wrong with me. I was traumatized. I've been traumatized. I've been traumatized before my sons passed away, you know. And in the death of my son didn't just pass away. I literally took my son off of a respirator. So I have to live with that every single day. My second son, I was on the phone with him when he passed away. I have to live with that. And you would think that's enough. A third one, I actually seen a video of how he got slain. So if I'm here to stand and to tell this story or to help, you know, that's what I'll do.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of the title of the organization that Mark heads, My Brother's Keeper. Mark, I'm thinking about this recognition that the president gave to My Brother's Keeper, Newark. And from your perspective, what does that mean for the organization? How does the organization use that, not to raise money, but to improve lives in Newark?
Sure. I mean, so I think it's an important question because I think it helps take us to the complete thought and idea of this recognition. I've said often, it's analogous. I have 3 children. It's analogous to having a child, right? Everyone celebrates. There's balloons, and then you got to go home, and now you're responsible for raising this
The real
child,
work.
right? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so this recognition is a celebration for the entire city. It's an acknowledgement to the entire ecosystem and everyone who's here and many who are not here. But the charge for MBK Newark is to now think about how do we take the lessons that have been learned from milestone 6, keeping boys and young men of color safe from violent crime, and how do we replicate those learnings across the other 5 milestones?
Right.
What does it look like to collaborate with community-based organizations and educators specifically around the first 4 milestones, which sit in this sector of education? What does it look like to focus on high impact data indicators across the other milestones? What does it look like to mobilize the voices of community members so that education is all of our responsibilities and not just the responsibility of schools, right? And BOE, charters, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the charge ahead, is how do we, MBK Newark, take the learnings from milestone 6 and begin to make sure that it spreads across the other 5 milestones.
Lakeisha, I hear you amening this.
Right, because we work very closely together on this, because we know that there's an increase in youth violence, right? And we're losing a lot of our young people either to incarceration or to death. And this,
Why do you think that is? You mentioned entertainment, and America is a place where, and I'm not going to beat up on any gaming industry, TV and film industry, or anything like that, but America is a place where in the world where violence is glorified. It's in, even in comedies, people are being shot, beaten up, pushed down the stairs, fought, and stuff like that, and there's I guess, for lack of a better expression, there's a culture of violence, and we use it to entertain ourselves. So when we see youth and youth violence that's on the rise, I guess to a certain extent, shouldn't we expect that to a certain extent? That's where we're being entertained. That's their introduction to so much entertainment.
and that's what we see, right? So we see violence everywhere. We see it on the TV, we see it in the music, we see it on our social media, and it's what gets likes. It's what helps them to have an identity, right? So it identifies them, right? In terms of self-esteem and self-confidence. The more violence you do, right, the more of a person that you are. It is in the music, it sells, right? And so the violent music sells, bullying in the schools, all of those things are around identity. And so we are seeing that increase happen. And as a result, we have an increase or in our young people being incarcerated. We see, decreases in them attending school. The absenteeism rates are, crazy. And so really trying to figure out and find a way for us to shift that culture in terms of music. So here in the city, we have a group called The Other Side of Newark, right? And we produced the album to be able to do positive music. For them to be able to tell their stories and talk about their life, but in a positive way that don't glorify. So violence may have been a stepping stone, an entry point, but it's not the end point, right? And so we're producing better music. We're trying to have better images. When we do 24 hours a piece, we're trying to have better images where they can be on the stage. We're about to do a ciphers on a corner, right, on the corners, and have our young people be able to come and show their talent, but in a positive way. Incentivize it so that they don't have to go into this music industry. They don't have to show violence, guns, all and killing and all of those things in order to be somebody.
Mark?
Yeah.
You have a minute left.
Absolutely. I think it's important also to acknowledge that the work that's been done in the CVI ecosystem, getting to 50 homicides was impressive, but we have a long way to go. And I think the way we get from 50 to 0 is by getting the first 5 milestones right.
Mark, I want to thank you. Ms. Rogers, I want to thank you. Lakeisha, as always, I want to thank you as well. I also want to thank our listeners and our callers. I want to thank the team here as well. Ang Santos, the producer, Ken Downey Jr., call screener, Corey Goldberg, board operator, Jamara Wakefield, social media coordinator, and Doug Doyle, our executive producer. I want to thank everybody for being here. I could go on and talk to you all night long about this. I'm your host, Michael Hill. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. This is WBGO Newark.